All right. So it looks like we're starting off with me. And this one I thought was pretty entertaining, a new machine learning theory. Uh, because the point is this guy in Hong Kong gave his machine learning computer a bunch of measurements of the orbits of planets, but not all the planets, the inner planets. And then he had it try to deduce where the outer planets were from that. And the point is, he did it without feeding them information about the laws of gravity. And they were able to learn and figure out where the outer planets were. So he said, this raises the whole concept of what the meaning of science is. Now, when I learned science, you learn something like F equals ma, and then you say, we understand this. And that's what I thought science was. But he says, why should that be what science is? Why should it come down to a single equation that a human can understand? If the model can predict other observations, that's science. You don't really need this intermediate step of an equation that a human can understand. And he's kind of got a point.
Well, here's the thing that I would object to. So the distance from the planet, the distance of the planets to the sun is very orderly. Like there's a pattern. I forget exactly what the pattern is, but there's a pattern where every so often you'll expect to find a planet.
Yep.
And so of course, if you feed it like, here's a planet here and here's a planet here, it's going to figure out that, well, what about a planet, where Jupiter should be or where Saturn is, that kind of makes sense. It's just, in fact, people have been predicting, where these planets should be long before we had a good understanding of gravity.
Yep.
So, I don't really see this as being that groundbreaking.
Well, no, but I mean, this is all science ever has been, is you measure something and you find a pattern, then you extend that pattern. And, but the point is here, you do it all with machine learning. So if you did it that way, you might find new things that humans don't fit easily into their simple minds.
I mean, I hope so.
Yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
I thought it was cute. All right, so then we got Liz. Oh yes, Zuckerberg's going to inflict pain.
Yeah, so this one was pretty good. And I don't know if you are deliberately not showing the articles on the screen, but
Yeah.
as we go through them.
We talked about this. I think there's no need to share them really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought this was pretty good because it just sort of really kind of exposes the level of Game of Thrones that occurs at the not just lower levels of the industry, but the higher levels too. So Facebook really doesn't want anyone doing anything that's going to interfere with their tracking and data harvesting on internet users, and they're really displeased with the fact that Apple is introducing increased privacy controls and alerts to their system. So because Facebook is trying to say that that Apple's not really doing this to protect users, that they're really just doing it to increase profit, which, I mean, okay.
Yeah, well,
Maybe they're not also not mutually exclusive.
yeah, well,
because consumers actually.
I remember when Bill Gates said,
yeah,
putting the browser in Windows 98 to cut off the oxygen supply to Netscape.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great example. Great example, because it's very much like that scenario. So it's going to be interesting to see how this continues to unfold, and what consumers have to say about it.
Yeah, well, I'm not even sure this is a bad thing. This is the old Adam Smith model. Companies are just supposed to compete like savage beasts, tearing each other apart, and that will create the perfect utopia of capitalism. That's the whole theory.
Yeah, theoretically, we'll see. I mean, I like alerts and the option to opt out of browser tracking whenever possible. So, I mean, and I I think that I think a lot of other users like to have more granular controls and alerts to know when they're being tracked through their browser use. So
Well, I
I
don't
think,
think so. I think 95% of users have no idea what it means and just go with the defaults, which is what the whole issue is. I mean, Apple and Microsoft
Well,
want to change the default to block all the trackers just to kill Facebook and Twitter.
that's true. That's true. But I do think that there is increasing awareness of it um, amongst the users, and I think that that's going to continue to grow over time because people are starting to catch on to the fact that they're being tracked. The problem is that there are no, they don't know what to do about it. They know they kind of have this vague notion that these things are happening and it's maybe not so great, but they just don't know what to do about it. So, I mean, I think that Apple made a step in the right direction with the alerts and the more granular privacy controls, but companies like Facebook and Twitter are going to be really upset about that because they are data companies. Ditto Google. If all these companies were cut off from their consumer data supply tomorrow, it would cause major problems for them.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm really on board with this. I mean, I heard ads for VPNs and they say, these companies are making money off your data. Deny them your data by using our VPN. And I'm like, what's the point of that? I mean, Google tracks me every time I buy anything or even click on a link. I see nothing but ads for that for the next week. But how does that hurt me? I mean, they're making money off me. Well, they need some money. Why do I care? That's the part I
Maybe
never
you
quite
don't care.
Well, no, well, I think why would a normal person care? I mean, if they're really just targeting ads, then that's really not a problem. In fact, I used to constantly see ads for horrible things I don't want to buy. Now I mostly see ads about information security training courses and stuff I'm interested in. I'm not being harmed by this as far as I can tell.
Well, I think some people, myself included, have an issue with the way that this data is collected and amalgamated over time and how it might be used, because the issue is less that they're collecting it and more with what's going to happen to that data on down the line. Because yes, it might be innocuous that, that it's in some list somewhere that I bought some RAM yesterday, but over time, the amount of data collected on consumers is vast and great. And as we've seen with some of the other stories we report on, that data is available for purchase to the highest bidder, and it can be used to do things like implicate innocent people in criminal investigations, for example.
Or to clear
And so
them.
without any kind of, what's that?
Or to clear them.
It could be used to exonerate a person too.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking,
which is actually something we talked about.
Well, yeah, no, I was thinking
sorry,
Cambridge Analytica, where the data was actually used to influence our election and our politics.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right, Sam. I think in terms of, are we going to use this data for, targeted ads? What's the big deal? Well, actually, yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, targeted ads are nice because you're not going to be bombarded with commercials for, baby diapers, which
Right.
is just a waste of everyone's time and money. On the other hand, this data does, get sold, and it does move around to people who use it for things that you might not be okay with.
Yeah, that's why I think things like the GDPR are right, where you let them use the ads to target stuff, but you limit them to only use it for the purpose they collected it. Like when you do business with a company, you agree to letting them, like Gmail has the right to look at your mail to target ads, and you agreed to that. But then they shouldn't be selling it to third parties
Right.
for other purposes. That's why I think that's where I don't think you want to choke off the free internet, which is what killing ad tracking would do.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a discussion for another time, whether or not we want to kill, the free internet in favor of things like Wikipedia. Because I mean, there have been successful models of things that are free or that are donation supported that turn out really good. And then there are issues with platforms like Facebook, which of course are paid for, through monetization, through the collection of data, which, has some questionable side effects. So maybe the internet would be better if we, got rid of the collection of data to make money, model. But that's a whole debate. I don't think we can do that in this podcast.
Yeah, I think we can't get there. I think America is wedded to this concept of free market and capitalism, and it's not going to retreat from it in a hurry. Anyway, we got
No, but aiming for balance is good.
Makes for what?
I said aiming for balance is good. Like you said, sort of what the way that GDPR works is a good goal to aim for.
Yeah. Anyway, so the Hope mission.
Yes, Hope. So this is going to be a big week for Mars. You're just going to see Mars in the news all week. So later this week, before I start getting into the article, I just want to give a shout out to NASA, who is landing their Perseverance rover this week. So that'll be fun. Let's see, 15, I think on Wednesday, maybe. I'll have to look it up. But yeah, they're going to do a live stream and you can watch it, go down onto the surface of Mars and it'll be great. Or it'll be a fiery crash and it'll be also great. So either way, you're in for a good time. Hopefully it'll be a success. And if it's not, that's also fun to watch. But before we get into that, the United Arab Emirates sent a probe to Mars, and it has sent back its first picture. It's going to go into orbit and take pictures. And so I just want to welcome the UAE to the international peaceful exploration of the solar system. Congratulations, UAE, on your successful Hope probe mission to Mars.
Somebody else is there too, right? China or India?
Yep, China's there too. I forget the Chinese probe name, but yeah, a lot of people are going to Mars, and that's great. International cooperation in science is always a wonderful thing to see. So.
And they're all doing it because this is the moment at which it's easiest to get to Mars, right?
Right. So every 2 years, there's a period of time where you can get this trajectory to Mars where you can use the least amount of fuel, essentially. So it's not like you can't go to Mars at any other time. The thing is, fuel is such a commodity in space that you have to really time your Hohmann transfers, just right. And that happens once every 2 years. And so, all the probes are now arriving, and we did it, people, on not just America, but the entire world. And
it looks like the Emirates are not going to land. They're just going to orbit it, right?
They're going to orbit, and that's fine. I mean, especially because this is their first interplanetary mission.
Yeah.
Just getting to another planet, is a huge accomplishment for anyone or any nation. So
it's the first time for the Chinese too, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But apparently our lander is going to do something dangerous, and they think it might crash.
Oh yeah, it sometimes does. You just mess up once. Of course, there was that famous example with the lander that they forgot to convert feet to meters or something, and it's stuff like that just happens all the time. Space is just a series of unfortunate events.
I remember last time they said a couple of weeks ago they had one about the ISS saying, "Oh yeah, there's a leak. There's like 3 leaks, but these leaks are only 0.5 millimeter, and we're not worried until they get up to bigger than that." And I'm like, "There's leaks. There's leaks all the time. It doesn't matter. I'm not sure I'd have that feeling if I was up there like you."
Like I said, that's just sort of the attitude you have to have. Obviously, when you're working with people in space, safety is the most important thing, and you double check and you triple check. I remember we were watching the docking of the recent SpaceX, thing to the Dragon to the International Space Station. They took like 3 hours to open the hatch because they had to check the pressures and make sure everything was fine, and you just have to double and triple check. Space is dangerous, and especially when you're doing things without people involved, things can go wrong really easily, and you either have to be like, oh no, this is terrible, or just embrace the fact that it's difficult. And every time there's a quote unquote failure, that just means that there's an opportunity to learn something new.
Yeah, there's that. All right. And so I thought this was amazing. San Francisco's been really living up to our image as the place that has absolutely no sense. So the school board, recently made a big deal of renaming all the schools, but now they have another one. So they're trying to add a new member to some school board committee, and he's a gay man. And he brought him to a Zoom session to have like an interview to decide if they would let him in, and he never got to say a word. For 2 hours, he sits there waiting for them to ask him a question. And all they do is say, well, he's a gay man. and that would be good because that's representation, but he's a white male and we can't have any more of them because that's not representation. Can't we find a black gay man or something? And then they finally decided not to take him and kicked him off without him ever saying a word, because it's all about representing different groups and having the correct balance of the numbers of so many people Latino and so many people black and so many people gay. And, this is left-wing racism. I mean, and he's complaining, they don't even see me as a human. They just see me as a representation of some number to meet a statistical quota. And anyway, we have a lot of this nonsense out here.
I mean, so here's the thing. Representation is really important, especially in public work, right? You can't have a bunch of white men running the school system. Okay, when you're dealing with such a diverse area, right? You just can't. But the way that you integrate is not through kind of forced, we're just going to look at somebody's, race or ethnicity and just put them on based on that, because then you can get into a lot of trouble where you don't pick necessarily the most qualified person. And City College had to deal with that as well. I remember they picked someone really bad as I don't know if it was the president or something, but they did a bad job, but they were mostly picked for diversity reasons. And you have to balance, truth. And I always say, like, hey, if you have a choice between, like a white straight male, president and someone who's equally qualified, who comes from a less privileged background, you should almost always go with the person with the less privileged background, not only because it means that they, worked, twice as hard to get where they are, but also, it's just more, representative of the community and stuff like that. But you can't be like, well, we have this highly qualified person over here and someone who, had a history of bankrupting institutions over here, but they're the right, but they looked right for the job. Let's, you can't do that. You have to, you really want to encourage, people from different backgrounds to just be the best they can be and encourage excellence and sort of have it naturally diversified rather than try to force it anyway.
Well, it's a huge issue. But I mean, we're way over on one side here and a lot of the country is way over on the other side. But San Francisco seems, this is why I wish we had actual Republicans that made any sense, because when the Democrats run your place 100%, they drive you over into a different kind of crazy town.
I don't, there's a big difference between, going a little too far, wanting to be racially diverse, ignoring, personal, whether or not someone's like perfect for the job or not, versus, QAnon conspiracy theorists becoming mainstream. I mean,
that's the problem. The current Republican Party is too crazy to provide the necessary balance.
Well, no, I mean, yes, I agree that the left can go too far, but when the left go too far, at least they're in the right spot. They're in the right mindset, right? They're not being malicious,
Oh, the left can go too far and they can go all the way to where they just take over the government and create social communist governments and crush the enemy.
Right.
And
But
close the universities and make the professors go till the fields to let them learn how the common people live. It hasn't happened too recently here, but they do that too.
Yeah, but at least, they're, like I said, their heart is in the right place. Their means maybe not so much, but you can be like, okay, yeah, okay. I agree, racial diversity is important. I agree that, we shouldn't, have a rich autocracy, ruling over everyone. That's a great idea. But with a lot of the right-wing extremism, it's like, yeah, white supremacy. Like, wait, no.
Well, here's what I don't get about this article is that they have been having trouble getting anyone to volunteer for this position.
Yeah.
And then they talked about it for 2 hours with this guy without even asking him any questions, and then declined to allow him to be on the board. But there's nobody else that wants to do it, at least from what it says in the article. So now no parent is going to be filling that position. And to me, it doesn't make sense why you would rather not have anyone at all than this dad who actually wants to do it when they're having a hard time getting anyone to do it, period.
Well, this kind of reminds me of some colleges that bring in teachers and then pay them nothing and then kick them around and abuse them also, and then wonder why they can't get any good teachers.
Wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, anyway, so now we got a murderer checking the source code of the DNA kit.
Yeah, so I thought this was a pretty interesting article for a number of reasons. Essentially, this guy is on trial for murder, and there's a program called True Allele that analyzes genetic evidence from criminal cases, and the defense wants to do a code review
Yep.
of the tool that's being used. Now, I thought first off, this is an interesting defense tactic, but second, it raises some good questions. In that there's been a battle over whether they're going to be allowed to review the source code or not. There have been cases of other forensic software that have affected criminal cases, a significant number of criminal cases before. So, on one hand, it seems sort of absurd. On the other hand, it makes a lot of sense in that you'd want to see if this is if you'd want to see if there are any potential errors that could affect your case. Now, it's interesting because they got denied the right to review the software, and then they're appealing that denial. And one of the figures that jumped out to me here was, where is it in here? One of the things that jumped out to me was that I believe their CEO said, their co-founder, said that he argued against allowing this because it's so dense that it would take 8.5 years to review it at the rate of 10 lines an hour. And I'm just like, dude, if you're doing your code review and you're only getting through 10 lines per hour, you're doing something wrong.
Besides, there's automated code review tools and stuff.
Yeah, and I'm just like, dude, that's a good thing to tell a judge who has no clue what a code review looks like to strengthen your point.
Well, I'm surprised they actually did find supposedly a secret function causing the FST other software to find too many people guilty.
Yep.
When genetic testing came out, they said this is 100% perfect. You can trust it. And that really doesn't seem to have worked out that way at all.
Yeah, it really doesn't. And it's interesting too, because this is another situation, just like you mentioned with the data, where it's something that can be used to both implicate innocent people and also exonerate innocent people who've been convicted of crime. So it's really a complex issue to look at.
Yeah, and really, I think code review is just part of it. This is the way it's always been. A forensic examiner is supposed to take the totality of the steps, and the rival forensic examiner is supposed to independently examine it, and then they argue, and often over technical things that the court can't understand, but they base it on the credibility of the examiner. So,
yep,
it seems like exposing the source code would be part of that.
I agree.
Yeah. Anyway. Then we got, this trying to use the cops trying to stay off of film.
Right. So the cops have a new way of making sure that they're not being recorded. And that is through, of course, using copyright filters. So what cops in Beverly Hills have been doing, according to Vice magazine or the Vice website, is that they'll blare Beatles in the background, like, Yesterday or something. And while they're being recorded, and of course, because of the copyright issues, all the websites will just, take it down and not have the audio being recorded. And so, this is a problem that we have to deal with now. I'm sure there are going to be tools around it. There's already some tools from like NVIDIA, for example, that will take out background noise from from audio. So if you have like a vacuum going in the background, you can have the AI audio filter take that out. And I'm pretty sure eventually we're going to have tools that will take out background music and, stuff like that, that might be interfering with our ability to document cops behaving badly. But until that happens, the cops have a little bit of a defense. I should say the bad cops. So if you're a good cop, and I use that term very loosely, I don't know if there's such a thing as a purely good cop, but if you are not a crooked cop, let's just say, then having this video on all the time, being recorded is great for you because you can prove your innocence all the time, right? However, if you are not so great of a cop, if you do things that are a little crooked, maybe you don't like following the rules so much, you don't like being recorded. And so obviously what this tool does is it just allows crooked cops to remain crooked cops.
Yeah.
This was one of the ones I was like debating on reporting on Friday because it's so good. And I think that, and I had read several different stories too, where it's not just Beverly Hills cops. Like this seems to be something that's going around like the cop message boards or whatever, however they interact, because this is happening in a bunch of different places. So this is the new tactic. But one thing that sprung to mind when you were mentioning that NVIDIA software is that this software already does exist. However, it's not consumer available yet. My former neighbor who runs a recording studio was showing me the software that is so sensitive that when he's recording bands and musicians, if like say my dog barks while they're doing a take, he can use the software to just remove the dog bark from the track, and you would never be able to tell that anything had changed. And I mean, it's so sophisticated that it really blew my mind. And I've been around like technical audio stuff for over 20 years now because it's one of my own interests. And I had never really seen anything like this. It's industry standard now. And while it's not consumer available yet, that's how it's been with everything else over the last 20 or 30 years. It starts off and it's just a studio product, and now you look at it, every other musician's got a home recording studio now. So these things will become available to the public, at which point they're going to have to come up with another underhanded technique to try and avoid exposure.
Yeah, I'd like to see an administrative control. I'd like it to just be a law that the police are not allowed to hide from being filmed. Anyway.
Yeah, you would think that'd be a law. You would think they would get in trouble for that.
Yes.
But there's a certain amount of brotherhood and sisterhood that goes on when you're policing, and they look out for each other. And a lot of the times, I understand it. The cops have to deal with some pretty bad people, and they're put in dangerous situations and stuff like that. And I get it, but at the same time, you're public servants. Come on.
Yep. Well, I think that's the big issue now, is trying to deal with police brutality, and we're not seeming to get too far in dealing with it.
I mean, but the thing is, the police brutality is not so much a bug, but a feature of the system, and that's what we need to really address. It's not, I always get a little upset when people say, it's just a few bad apples. Well, no, it's really a big bad system. Not a few bad apples, and we need to really think about ways that we can reform policing itself to be more community friendly.
Yes, yeah, I think we need to. Anyways, this one I thought was funny from Hacker Fantastic. Ant miners are these devices people buy and use to mine Bitcoin. And they turn out to be really badly made. Like you would imagine, they have a default password nobody ever changes, and they have a bunch of listening ports. So somebody decided to just brick all the ant miners, so he can just connect to them and zero the firmware so they're bricked, and set up a bot to find, you can just find them on Shodan and do that. So you can just make the Bitcoin mining rate drop to zero. And this is like, it reminds me when people took those Wi-Fi pineapples to DEF CON. And then people would just hack into them and replace them with like insults if you left the default password on them. But anyway, I don't know if these things are still useful, but I guess some people are still using them to mine Bitcoins. Anyway, so I thought that was kind of cute.
It is cute.
Yeah. And I'd like to understand this one better, yours, where the guy hacked in through the supply chain. I saw this. It sounded impossible.
Well, it did. It does and it doesn't. So the way that I understood it, essentially this Romanian security researcher managed to compromise through a supply chain attack. Essentially, he called it dependency confusion, where he managed to replace code dependency packages on as part of private projects with public code packages. Now, he didn't put anything malicious in there. He was just testing this to see if it worked. And essentially the way that it works was that the company software applies automatic updates. So like essentially if you're running software with a certain dependency, say you're running something that's got an older version of Python installed, but there's a newer version out there, then the software detects that you're not using the most up-to-date version and will automatically grab whatever the newest thing out there is. Now, what I was confused by, so essentially what he did in this case, and I was confused by this, essentially what he did was made repos in GitHub with names that sounded very similar to whatever the companies were using for their dependencies. He was essentially able to set up his own fake files with the same names, and then the software would update these. Now, I'm not sure entirely how that part works. The only thing that I can think of is that the modules, the corporate modules, are set to search for those instead of install from a static repository. And I would guess that the reason for that is because usually whenever the dependency updates to the next version, the name of the sub repo is going to change. Whatever that file name is going to change. So they probably have to set up the function so that it searches for it. And then I'm guessing that's how it gets caught, is when it's searching for the updated dependency module. That's when you can slip in your counterfeit one by using one with the same name.
Yeah, apparently they're making local ones. I think I finally am getting it. Companies have local repositories with non-public names, but if you make a public repository with the same name and a later version, it will be preferred. So that seems to be the fundamental flaw here. They have private proprietary code going through the same update process as updating their public code.
That may be it, because he was saying that that they were internal package names. So yeah, that would make sense to me.
Yeah, it does seem like a really fundamental flaw with this sort of distributed updating where you have local caches and you have public servers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's really caught on to a major defect in our whole supply chain system here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially considering how successful and widespread his compromises were. He went and got a bunch of bug bounty money off of it, which is cool.
Yeah, 130 grand. That's pretty nice. Well, I hope, of course, I wonder exactly what companies can do. I wonder if they can just change the settings of their updating modules to fix it.
I wondered that. I also wondered if, they have to be more diligent about, for example, like claiming packages on stuff like NPM or Homebrew or whatever, so that it's designated to be theirs instead of something that someone else can use. I don't know. I mean, maybe this is one aspect of the process that should trigger manual review every time.
You know, this happened to City College about 5 years ago for DNS. They had a server that had some kind of strange defect where one of our master servers was putting out an old version of a DNS record, which was correct, but there was a newer version on another server that would update it and make it incorrect. So for all the students for like weeks, the City College page would vanish for a day and then come back for a day and vanish for a day, because these waves of updates through DNS would go through and keep undoing and redoing the change. And there's a lot of these distributed systems where you have local caches and versions flying around can lead to this madness.
Yeah. And it's a problem. I mean, it's clearly a big problem.
Yeah.
So.
And then we got the pseudo edit heap overflow. I think we've seen this before.
Well, if you're getting deja vu, it's because we're seeing a lot of pseudo bugs coming out. And so to make matters worse, there is now a pseudo edit bug, a heap overflow bug in pseudo edit. So for people that don't know, when you edit the sudoers file, if you make a mistake, that can be pretty bad. So there's a special editor for editing sudoers that, I mean, I've never used it. I always risk it. But it is there. If you're very concerned about not making any mistakes to the sudoers file, you want to make sure that you don't mess anything up too badly, so you can still get sudo access. There's this sudo edit program, and there's a heap overflow vulnerability in it. I'm not gonna go into details and bore everyone, but yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that the saga continues with pseudo vulnerabilities.
Or does it end up giving you privilege escalation?
Or code execution. So if you're running sudo edit, you should already have, elevated privileges, but you just can't, do much with it except to edit sudoers. But of course, with this, you can have it do much, much more. Supposedly,
all right.
It's a heap overflow. So,
well, that's good. But I think it kind of shows that there's just bugs everywhere, and just if you haven't found the bugs, probably just haven't had the right person looking for them.
Yeah, that's the most frustrating thing about pen testing, is that I know there are bugs in the system, and I know there are bugs people haven't found. The only issue, of course, is finding the bugs would just take so much time and effort that is just not worth it, unless I want to spend a month, going over every single program, finding that one overflow, and then writing next place. I can't do it.
Yep. I've been auditing Android apps again, and I found a few with entertaining, bizarre, poor decisions that I haven't quite figured out how to exploit, but it sure looks like they did the wrong thing there.
Yes. There's a lot of people developing Android apps that go on Stack Overflow. They're new to programming. They do things that aren't necessarily the wisest thing to do.
Yep.
And lots of fun to be had.
Yep. And Liz had one about farmers hacking their own tractors.
Yeah, this is something that we've talked about before a little bit in the past, but this is kind of interesting for a couple reasons, because number one, because there's pirate software out there now that you can use to in place of the proprietary John Deere software. You can there's actually like Where's forums now for tractor software, and you can buy it off of like shady Eastern European dark websites, which I think is kind of awesome, because there are now all these like golden heartland of America farmers who are turning into total hackers because of this, and they're starting to see why it's important to have the right to repair, and why fixing your own stuff which can be considered hacking under, under the broad sanctions of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. These guys are probably technically liable for prosecution or whatever, but because it's becoming a much greater issue, and because corn-fed American farmers are a really good cultural meme, and because they have the ear of congressmen right now, they're starting to be a bit of a shift in the way that we look at this stuff, and it comes down to these farmers who are unable to repair our tractors. So it's one of those sort of unlikely avenues where it's going to turn out, it's turning out to be, to provoke some good thought towards, maybe we shouldn't make it illegal for you to open up products that you own and modify them and repair them yourself, whether that's software or hardware products. So I think that's pretty cool.
It's been going on my whole life, starting with the phones. Another thing I've heard, I don't own a Tesla, but from what I've heard, there's software updates to your Tesla that you have to pay for, give it new features. Yep. So you can hack your Tesla to like give it the features without paying for them, I guess. Although I haven't heard of people doing that.
Right. Like for example, they throttle how much you can charge your battery unless you pay for an upgrade.
They do?
And then if you pay for, like it only charged till 70% or whatever, so which limits your range. And then if you pay the extra, if you pay the extra 10 grand or whatever, they'll unlock it and you can do it the whole way.
So obviously, if somebody hacks that, that's begging for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty ridiculous way to make money, I would think, to sell someone a product and then deliberately cripple it.
Well, it's like in-app purchases, basically. Like you can get the software for $5 or whatever, but if you want to do other stuff with it, you got to pay more.
Well, I've heard people say Teslas are wonderful, but I'm surprised they put up with that. Anyway, any more comments? Well, I'm going to stop the recording then.